Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of Troy City Council. My name is William Lutz, President of Council. It's Monday, August 1st, 2020 at 7 p.m. Here in Council Chambers. We'll begin tonight's meeting with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance given by Mr. Roselle.
We gather here in City Hall to deliberate on matters which are of utmost importance to the Troy community. We ask you, Heavenly Father, to bless this meeting before us this evening. Oversee with your infinite wisdom the many projects that will issue forth from this place in order to continue the growth and prosperity that exists here in Troy, Ohio. Grant your paternal blessing over each one of the elected officials, city staff, and all others present tonight. All things we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Roselle. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Twist?
Here.
Mrs. Marshall?
Here.
Mr. Pierce?
Here.
Mr. Sievert?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
Present.
Mr. Whidden?
Here.
Mr. Roselle?
Here.
Mrs. Snee? Mr. Schilling?
Move to excuse Miss Snee.
Second.
It has been moved to excuse Mrs. Snee by Mr. Siebert, seconded by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Roselle?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee is excused.
Move to excuse Mr. Schilling.
Second.
It's been moved to excuse Mr. Schilling by Mr. Whidden, and we'll second it by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Roselle?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling is excused.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. This time we will begin our meeting with a public hearing on Ordinance 039, 2022. Mrs. Knight, will you please kindly read the ordinance?
An ordinance changing the zoning of in-lot 11513 in the city of Troy, Ohio from R1 AAA to the city zoning of R4. This is the land known as the Sheridan annexation.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. If you wish to speak for or against the rezoning ordinance, we invite you to come to the podium, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume. Seeing no one, we will declare the public hearing closed. We'll ask Mrs. Knight to read a summary of the minutes of our last meeting of Troy City Council.
Minutes of council, July 18, 2022. A public hearing was held on Ordinance 036, a rezoning. Committee reports. Buildings and Utilities Committee recommended legislation be prepared for the Kidder Ditch Improvement Project. Community Partnerships Committee recommended legislation be prepared for the Buckeye House Renovation Project. Legislation be prepared authorizing legislation for the Tour de Donut event and for the Donut Jam event. Both events are on August 26 and 27. Personnel Committee reported regarding an appointee to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that appointment was approved of Matthew Post. Resolution number R55, 2022, Kidder Ditch Improvement Project, bid authorization, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R56, bid authorization for the Buckeye House Renovation Project, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 03622, a rezoning, was given hearing and second reading. Ordinance 03722, related to the Tour de Donut event, was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance 0382022, related to the Donut Jam event, was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 039, a rezoning of the Sheridan annexation, was given first reading. Following comments, council adjourned at 7:19 p.m.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. How does council wish to dispose of the minutes this evening?
To approve.
Second.
It has been moved to approve the minutes by Mr. Roselle, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Roselle?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We have 7 committee reports tonight. We will begin with the Buildings and Utilities Committee and Mrs. Marshall.
All right. On July 25th, committee members Whidden and Marshall met to consider bidding authorization for the wastewater treatment plant aeration expansion project. The project will increase the plant capacity from 7.0 to approximately 9.6 mgd. This plant expansion is vital to the continued commercial and industrial growth of Troy. The project cost of $14 million is to be funded through a loan from the Ohio Water Pollution Control Loan Fund. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the wastewater treatment plant aeration expansion project at a cost not to exceed $14 million. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Twist, Mr. Whidden, and Mrs. Marshall, myself as chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Marshall. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we'll go to the Community and Economic Development Committee, and standing in for Mr. Schilling tonight, Mr. Pierce.
This committee met on July 25th to consider the recommendation from the Troy Planning Commission that in lots 11514, the property known as Canfarelli Annexation, located at 1322 Washington Road, be rezoned from the county zoning of R1AAA, one family residential, to city zoning of R3, single family residential district. This committee supports the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission regarding this proposed rezoning and recommends its council adopt Ordinance 036-2022, respectfully submitted by myself, and I believe Mrs. Snee was here, and Mr. Schilling was here as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Community Partnerships Committee, and Mr. Rozell.
Thank you, Mr. President. On July 25th, this committee met to consider an amended lease between the Community Improvement Corporation of Troy, Ohio, CIC, and the city regarding the CIC handling the lease of the property known as Lincoln Community Center, LCC. The amendment would include the address of 130.5 Ash Street in the lease, provide for the city to pay electric and natural gas costs for LCC property, and further clarify maintenance responsibilities. It is a recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared accepting the recommendation of CIC to amend the lease between the CIC and the city regarding Lincoln Community Center, authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to execute any documents related thereto. This committee supports emergency legislation so that the transfer of the utility bills can be finalized. It's respectfully submitted by Jeff Schilling, Mr. Todd Sievert, myself, William Rozell, as chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we'll go to the Finance Committee, and Mr. Sievert.
Thank you, Mr. President. This committee met on July 25 regarding authorizing an application for Ohio Public Works Committee funds for the South Stanfield Road Improvement Project Phase 2. The project area of this phase is from West Stanfield Road to the Tractor Supply Company and is scheduled for construction the summer of 2024. The pre-design estimate is $1.3 million. The funding application would be for an amount not to exceed $600,000. It is a recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to file an application for OPWC funds for Phase 2 of the South Stanfield Road Improvement Project and to execute any necessary agreement if the funding application is approved. As the application deadline is August 8th, this committee supports emergency legislation. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Rozell, and myself.
Thank you, Mr. Sievert. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Safety and Health Committee, and Mr. Twist.
Thank you, Mr. President. On July 25th, this committee met to consider the legislation that would require state licensure through the Medical Board of Ohio for each individual providing massage services. This would assist the police department in efforts to ensure that human trafficking and sexual activity are not occurring at businesses offering massage services. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared to enact new legislation that would regulate massage services as discussed within the detailed report. Respectfully submitted by Christy Marshall, Jeffrey Whitten, and myself as Chair, William Twist.
Thank you, Mr. Twist. Are there any comments or questions on this report?
I have a question, Mr. President.
Mr.
I just
Seaver.
want to, I don't see anyone in the audience. There was some participation at this committee meeting at the last go-round. I assume they're satisfied with the statute as drafted, or has anyone heard anything differently? No? Okay. So,
I talked with them after the meeting, and they were fine, and we'll take a look at it, the legislation when it's written.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seaver. Moving on to the Streets and Sidewalks Committee, and Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, sir. This committee met on July 25 to consider the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission that council accept the dedication of 1.021 acres of in-lot 10853 along Barnhart Road and Finner Road as a public right-of-way. And it is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared accepting the dedication of 1.021 acres of public right-of-way as part of the Momentum Center Park Section 1 replat. This committee supports emergency legislation so the county's project can be on schedule. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we'll end our reports with an oral report on a liquor permit. Standing in for Mrs. Sievert in the Law and Ordinance Committee is Mr. Sievert.
Thank you. The Ohio Division of Liquor Control has transmitted the notice of the following. Notice that a D3 Trex permit for Fermentum Enterprises LLC for the address of 521-31 Wayne Avenue, Dayton, Ohio, to the Troy address of 8 South Market Street, Troy. This was previously approved by council. Notice of the new D3 permit application for Speakeasy Ramen LLC DBA Speakeasy Miso, 101 West Main Street. The police department has not recommended an objection or hearing request be filed. That's the end of the report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sievert. Any comments or questions on that report? Seeing none, we go to citizen comments for items on the agenda. We've heard 7 reports this evening. We have 2 resolutions and 7 ordinances. If you wish to address council on any of those items, you can come to the podium, give your name and address. You have 2 minutes to address council. Mr. Kerber is our timekeeper.
Kelly Snyder, 935 Atlantic Street, Troy. I have a couple questions about the Lincoln Center.
Okay,
I don't know what to call that, whatever it is that's happening.
the lease agreement.
Lease agreement.
Thank you, lease agreement. Do you have a dollar amount on the utilities that will be expended?
Mr. Titterton, can you handle that question?
So we've always paid for a pretty large amount of the electric, and so when they expanded the building, I believe it's approximately $3,000 more, somewhere in that range, don't quote me on it, and then the...
For the year or for a month or?
Year.
Do you know what the,
Increase over what we're paying now.
and what are you paying now? Do you know that?
Boy, I want to say it's 30,000, something like that. The gas will be a smaller amount. That would be a new addition for us, but I don't have the numbers in front of me, but again, it's several thousand.
Okay. And then you said clarification of maintenance. What is that clarification? Like
Clarification?
yeah, in the paperwork, it said there was a clarification. In the lease agreement, there's going to be clarification of maintenance.
The clarification of maintenance is who is responsible for what. So in the past, when we had the first lease agreement, our staff was plowing the parking lots, and Lincoln Community Center shoveling the drives, but the back parking lot was originally going to be Lincoln's responsibility. Jeremy's already out there from the park department, or whoever, and so they'll just be plowing the whole thing. the park department used to clean the gutters, which is probably a 3 to 4 times a year event because the trees are so close to the building, which was kind of onerous for the park department. So in return, now Lincoln Community Center is doing that with whoever their contractor is, things like that.
Okay. Is there somewhere where that's like written anywhere? Because I never see like any dollar amounts whenever it's referring to Lincoln Center. I know with the rec, the dollar amount is always out there when you approve that, but it's never out there for,
Actually,
Just curious.
The budget, our published budget, Lincoln Community Center is a set of accounts in the general fund, always has been. And so that has the itemization of all of their accounts and the budgets for the year. It won't reflect the modifications until next year, because of course we're doing it after the budget's been published, but that's where you can find that.
okay. I guess I went to one of those meetings, I just don't remember seeing it on there, but okay. I'll go back and look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Snyder.
Mr. President, if I may.
Mr. Phillips.
Mrs. Slater.
Snyder.
Ms. Snyder. I'm sorry, Snyder. I don't know why Slater. That would be an excellent question for the auditor's office, that you could,
Public records?
huh?
Public records request, you'd have
Well,
to
a
give it to
public records request, but a simple
Yeah.
phone call or conversation with them, they can provide that.
Is that the county or the
Yeah, no,
city?
city.
Frager's office, John Frager's office.
It's easier than that though, Kelly. It is on our, it's one of the forms and documents that's online on our website.
Okay.
So you can find it right there. The whole budget is on our website.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other residents wish to ask questions or have any comments for the items on the agenda? Seeing none, we're moving to resolutions. We'll ask Mrs. Knight to read the first resolution of the evening, Resolution R57, 2022.
Resolution number R57, 2022. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the wastewater treatment plant aeration expansion project at a cost not to exceed $14 million. First reading.
How's council wish to act?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Siebert. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Move for adoption.
Second.
The 3 reading rule has been suspended. It's been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Twist. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next resolution of the evening, Resolution R58, 2022?
Resolution number R58, 2022. A resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission state capital improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs, and to execute contracts as required and declaring an emergency. This is the first reading. The emergency clause is due to the application needing to be filed by August 8th.
Move
Reading.
to suspend.
Second.
So we move to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Rozell, seconded by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The 3 reading rule has been suspended. It's been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Siebert. Are there any final comments or questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Moving on to ordinances, Mrs. Knight, will you please read the first ordinance of the evening, Ordinance 036, 2022?
Ordinance number 036, 2022, an ordinance changing the zoning of in-lot 11514 in the city of Troy, Ohio, from the Miami County zoning of R1 AAA, one-family residential, to the city zoning of R3 single-family residence district. This is to apply a city zoning to the Camfarelli annexation, has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. Third reading.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Sievert, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Are there any final comments or questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening? Ordinance 039, 2022.
Ordinance number 039, 2022, an ordinance changing the zoning of in-lot 11513 in the city of Troy, Ohio, from the Miami County zoning of R1 AAA, one-family residential, to the city zoning of R4 single-family residence district. This is to apply a city zoning to the Sheridan annexation, has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission, had a second reading, and so it will be going to committee following the public hearing tonight.
Well, in consideration of the public hearing tonight and a future assignment to the Community and Economic Development Committee, this will stand as the second reading. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance for our agenda, ordinance 040, 2022?
Ordinance number 040, 2022, ordinance accepting the dedication of right-of-way of in-lot 10853, located along Fenner Road and Barnhart Road as part of the plat of Momentum Center Park, Section 1. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. First reading.
How does council wish to act?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved to suspend the third reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Whidden. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Whidden. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening, ordinance 041, 2022?
Ordinance number 041, 2022, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into an amended lease with the Community Improvement Corporation of Troy, Ohio, regarding lease of the Lincoln Community Center facility and declaring an emergency. This is a first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
It's been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Rozal, seconded by Mr. Sievert. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
The three reading rule has been suspended. It's been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening, ordinance 042, 2022?
Ordinance number 042, 2022, an ordinance amending Section 1137 and Section 1143 of the zoning code of the City of Troy, Ohio, related to the Historic Preservation Overlay District. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. There will be a public hearing at the next meeting, and this is the first reading.
Thank you. Consideration of the public hearing to be held at the next meeting. This will be held over for a second reading. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening? Ordinance 043, 2022.
Ordinance number 043, 2022. Ordinance establishing Chapter 753, Massage Services of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Troy, Ohio. This is the first reading.
Move for suspension.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Twist, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Three reading rule has been suspended. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. And Mrs. Knight, will you please read the last ordinance of the evening, Ordinance 044, 2022?
Ordinance number 044, 2022. An ordinance changing the zoning of Lot 8386 in the city of Troy, Ohio from M2 Light Industrial District to a planned development industrial PDI. This is located at 2601 West Main Street, has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. There will be a public hearing at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. In consideration of the public hearing at our next meeting, this will stand as the first reading. We'll move on to communications and announcements. Mrs. Knight, do we have any this evening?
No, sir.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. This time, we'd like to give the floor for a presentation by Mr. Chris McKay, who's the Community Impact and Engagement Manager for Big Brothers and Big Sisters of the Miami Valley. Mr. McKay, please give your name and address. The floor is yours.
Thank you, council members, fellow citizens. My name is Chris Mackey. I am the Community Impact and Engagement Manager with Big Brothers Big Sisters Miami Valley. Big Brothers Big Sisters, for those of you who do not know, is a nonprofit mentoring organization. Serves around 500 youth in Miami, Montgomery, Greene, and Preble counties. Been around since 1958 in the Miami Valley area. And among the youth we serve about 100 youth in Miami County and about 30 youth in Troy. At Big Brothers Big Sisters, we create and support one-to-one mentoring relationships that ignite the power and promise of youth. And at Big Brothers Big Sisters, our vision, and I love our vision, is that all youth achieve their full potential. So how do we go about helping young people achieve their full potential, to be successful in life? We have two primary programs. The first is our community-based program, and as the title says, takes place in the community. In our community-based mentoring arrangements, we have bigs who are ages 21 and up, who are matched with littles or mentees who are typically aged about 6 to 14. They do one-to-one match activities that are safe and positive, and that are things that the little and the big enjoy. So going and getting a cup of coffee and talking, going fishing, playing a board game, going to the park and walking the dog. We also have a school-based program, and again, as the title would say, it takes place in the schools during the school year. And as part of the school-based program, we have a high school bigs program, as well as the ability for adults 18 and up to get involved and to mentor kids in a school-based setting. All of our Big Brothers Big Sisters matches focus on several things. First of all, higher aspirations. So basically helping littles to obtain greater self-confidence, self-esteem. Avoidance of risky behaviors. So helping ensure that littles do not get involved with the juvenile justice system, and helping littles to avoid substance abuse. And educational success. Especially thinking about all that youth have dealt with over the past couple years with the pandemic and being away from school. Mentoring can play a significant role in supporting the youth of our community. Indeed, of the littles in existing Big Brothers Big Sisters programs, about 90% of those littles have self-reported that their mentoring match helped them to improve their grades. Around 90% of littles self-reported that they have improved self-confidence as a result of having a mentor. And about 86% of those littles self-reported reduced depressive symptoms. And again, especially in light of some of the social emotional issues youth have dealt with over the past couple years, mentoring has been very beneficial. So what are bigs and what are littles? Again, what are mentors and mentees? Bigs are first of all safe. Big Brothers Big Sisters matches places a priority on safety to ensure that everyone involved in the match, especially youth, are safe. They're consistent. We do ask that Biggs, especially Biggs in the community program, can commit to serving at least a year, because it takes time to build that mentoring relationship, and also because we want to make sure that it's positive long-term for the littles, because not all littles, but some have had adults come in and out of their lives over time. Bigs are positive, they're non-judgmental, and they're able to work with parents or guardians to ensure that the mentoring relationship is positive for everyone involved in the mentoring match. Who are littles? They're youth in our 4-county service area. They're typically ages about 6 to 14, and they do go up to age 18 when they then graduate from the program. They're littles who want to have a mentor. We do a lot of training to make sure that Bigs are going into the program are well-trained, are screened. But we also want to make sure that littles who are going into the program want to have a mentor. And then they come from diverse backgrounds. Some littles have unfortunately been through a lot in their young lives. And then other littles, for example, are coming from a big family. And that family believes that an additional one-to-one positive adult role model would make a positive difference in the life of that youth. So I've talked about what littles are, just a little bit more about them. Littles are the 31 youth who are currently on our wait list, including 10 youth in Miami County who are waiting for a big sister or a big brother. Littles are Hunter, a 10-year-old male who has been waiting for 670 days for a big brother. Who wants a big brother who we can play football with, we can get ice cream with, and who wants to grow up to be a police officer or a professional wrestler. Littles are Hezekiah, a 9-year-old male who has been waiting over a year for a big brother, who likes sports and the outdoors, and who has had parents and a sibling, again, come in and out of his life, and who could really use the consistency that a big brother would provide. Littles are all kids who have so much potential. At Big Brothers Big Sisters, we defend the potential of youth like the kids in our program and the kids on our wait list. We need your support, council members and the members of this community, to especially give of your time as a volunteer. It's about 4 to 8 hours a month, so think about it. It's about an hour a week, 2 hours twice a month that you will be giving of your time to help littles be successful in life. From here, you all have a flyer that we've handed out, and free to give that to other community members if they would like those, about becoming a Big. But y'all are more than welcome to ask me any questions today or to follow up with our organization to learn more about becoming a big brother or big sister. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mackey. I apologize for mispronouncing your name earlier.
No, it happens.
Do council members have any questions of Mr. Mackey? Mr. Wood.
I have one. So I guess my uneducated opinion was that there might be an at-risk proponent for littles there, but is that not the case? So it could be really any youth that really just you see you might need, or parent or guardian or someone might need guidance or good guidance?
Absolutely. So Big Brothers Big Sisters provides our mentoring services to anyone in the community free of charge. And so that is, again, for youth who would be determined to be at risk, who have been through some significant issues in their lives, and other members of the community who, again, feel that their guardian or their sons or daughters could use a positive mentor.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Mackey.
Thank you.
Move on to comments and officials. Mayor Oda.
I have nothing to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Director of Public Service and Safety, Mr. Titterington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things, well, 3 things. National Night Out is tomorrow, 7 to 10 p.m. They are neighborhood block party type events scattered throughout the community, and the police department staff will be making a visit to each one of them. And anybody's welcome to attend those. I do want to thank Governor DeWine's office specifically the Office of Development, ODOD. We did receive the $500,000 grant to help offset the inflationary increase for South Stanfield Phase 1. And we also received 18% of additional money on top of the safety grant that we received or were awarded for West Main Street Phase 1, and that amounts to just over $450,000. So $950,000. Those were all because of the inflationary pressures that our bidding came in at. So do want to publicly recognize them. I know we put it out on social media and press release, but want to continue to hopefully stoke those fires and keep that door open. Third, final is Fire Station 11, the new one, not the old one. The staff is now at the new location. They're pretty much moved in. They are operating out of the station tonight, staying in the station, so that is our new location. We have a temporary occupancy there, which doesn't mean we're going to get kicked out. It's just they haven't given us a permanent one because we are still awaiting delivery of the generator. That is not due to be here until September sometime, which is important because we have to have the generator before we can have the elevator installed. Once we have all of that in place, Fire Chief wanted me to let everybody know we will have a public open house, which will be September, October range. Stay tuned for a date. That's all I have.
Wonderful news, thank you. Director of Law, Mr. Kerber.
Mr. President, I don't have anything this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kerber. Do council members have any comments this evening? Seeing none, do any city staff members have any comments this evening? Seeing none, we open up to audience comments. If you have anything that you wish to address City Council on tonight, please come to the podium, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Debbie Pike, and I live at 412 Ellis Street in Troy. I just want to clarify a few things. A, I would like to understand why the porta pot was taken out of the, what's that park called? Hurlinger. I'd like to know why it was taken.
I did check with the park superintendent. They took it out at least a year ago.
Right.
The reason they did that was that they had excessive amounts of vandalism and they couldn't keep it maintained and they had to keep replacing it. And so he decided to have it removed. There is one at Trossel Park, which is close by.
Where's Trossel Park?
Farther down Union Street.
It's on the same general area.
On
It's
Union Street?
smaller.
Yeah, down across from the gravel,
It's got a ball
Kind of
field.
close to where the railroad tracks are.
yeah, just past the railroad
Past
tracks.
the railroad tracks,
There's
right?
the baseball fields there.
One.
Oh, down at Mercer's. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So would we ever be able to get one back?
I don't know. We have
Okay.
to-
Number two, I would like for, I need someone to understand what I'm trying to say here, okay? I understood that the open checkbook got put down again. Don't understand why. If this is the citizens of Troy, just not your guys's, citizens of Troy's money, shouldn't we be allowed, and don't become, oh yeah, you can go and ask for a request and go here and go there and do this. No. Why can't the citizen of Troy know what money's coming in and where from and what money's going out from the city of Troy? Just
I
want a
can
clarification.
address your thing by, I'm not going to correct you, but I'm going to say that the open checkbook program never told you where the money was coming in.
Well, I
Open
think it's time we
checkbook
need
program
to.
was telling you half the story.
Yes.
Right.
It was not telling you where those revenues came from and how those revenues were derived or how much you got in specific revenues. And so it was really only telling you half of the story of the
But-
financial condition of the county.
But there is programs out there that shows you where the money comes from and how much the city of Troy got, what they spend it on.
That may be correct, but the open checkbook program certainly was not that program.
But can't we update it now, since we're updating everything else in Troy? Let's
The
do that.
individuals that promoted the open checkbook program made it very clear that they had absolutely no plans to add revenues to their program.
Okay. So why isn't the open checkbook to show us where you guys are spending the money being sent to a vote? Why can't we put it on a ballot and let the citizens of Troy vote on this? We did the DORA. I'm not smart enough, I understand, everybody knows that, I'm a plain person talking. But if you guys sit up here and said okay about the DORA, and then it was put on the ballot. So why can't someone tell me how to get this started? And why isn't this allowed to go for the citizens of Troy to understand? I know it's not very easy to understand, I understand that. But that would give us some kind of idea of what you're spending, you know, like how much money is the city of Troy putting into the golf course? How much did the city of Troy put into the Duke Parks? How much city of Troy is putting in, you know, here and there? That would be something I would like to see. How much are you spending on the east end of Troy and the power plant that's down there? Isn't there some kind of a plant, waste plant,
Wastewater treatment plant.
where we don't have to smell it? You know? I know you all over on that side of town don't smell it, so we would like not to smell it. I went back to work before I could come back to meetings here, but that's my problem. And, you know, I don't understand how, you know, I know you can't go to your people in your ward, and your people in your ward, and your people in your ward, but shouldn't the people in your ward be able to come up and say, hey, we want to know? And then what happens? They can't tell us.
I have a question for you or anyone that wants the checkbook. Did you watch, or you been able to watch the presentation that we got last week?
No, that was
Okay.
the thing. I have not had time to do it yet.
I know, that's true, we did, that's true, we got that.
Is it not,
But you could go back to one 4 or 5 years ago and watch that one.
but let's do a new one. 4 or 5 years ago was way back.
It's the
That's like
same,
30 years ago. and-
it's the same thing.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Titterton?
Yeah, I
No.
screwed that up, my
Ms.
bad.
Pike, based on your comments and what information you're looking for,
It's in the budget.
all of that data is in the budget. If you were here earlier,
Well, I
Mrs.
can't.
Snyder asked about the Lincoln Community Center, a budget. All of that is online. It's already online on our website. So it's there, and it's much easier to navigate than all of the bubbles and inputs that you can do with open checkbook. So if you're looking at what the sewer fund spent in 2021, you can go online, the document is there, and you can see it line by line,
Oh,
what
and-
we spent.
Okay,
You
then
can
it'll,
also say, you can also see the same information for the golf course, because that's a different fund, and that is online in the budget as well.
I thought all the money grouped together. You guys don't, you
We
don't,
invest it together. The general fund is appropriated together, but even the general fund has 25 different accounts, and each one is listed and outlined in that document, in the budget document online.
so it'll tell me how much City of Troy gave to the golf course. City of
Yes.
Troy gave
Yes.
to Duke Park.
And if
Yeah.
you're looking at it and you have a question, you can call City Hall while you're online, and we will point you right to the page.
So why can't we put it on the ballot?
Well, that's not the checkbook, that's just the budget.
Yeah, you
You-
don't
you-
need to put anything on
what-
the ballot
what do you-
See, we
because
used
it's
to
already there.
we used to get a finance report at the meetings. When I first started to come in, there was a paper that gave us finance reports.
Not anything to that level of
I'll
detail.
look back and see if I
Once a
can find one
month,
there.
you get a one, it's typically a one-pager that's in the items of interest, and that is listing all expenses between $25,000 and $50,000 dollars, because when we went, the statute went from 25 to 50 for bidding. I believe it was the previous president of council asked that we include that once a month, and so the auditor's office does supply that. That's the only financial detail that is regularly given.
Okay. So I'll be able to get on there and find out how much more the city of Troy gave the golf course. The city of Troy owns the golf course, right?
Correct.
Yes.
So you guys can put as much money as you want into it, even though it was voted down to begin with 4 or 5 years ago.
The golf course was not voted down. The golf course has been there for
50 years.
decades. Yeah.
No, the golf course, there was on a ballot once about the golf course.
the-
Am I being,
The replacement of the
Pardon me?
clubhouse,
Replacement of
the
the
replacement of the clubhouse was
Right.
included on the park levy or the recreation levy.
But it was
Recreation
voted
2020.
down.
The overall levy was voted down. At the time when we presented the information related to the recreation levy, we said one way or the other, the clubhouse has to be replaced. We ended up using cash reserves to do that. We'd done nothing else that was on the recreation levy, but we had to replace the clubhouse because it
Senior
was
citizens.
that bad a shape. That was
I don't
5 years ago.
understand any of this, because I don't understand. If you put it on the ballot, no, and it gets voted down, how can you go ahead and spend the citizens of Troy's money on something we just voted down?
You voted down increasing property tax, or I guess it ended up being income tax.
Yeah,
You voted down additional revenues for it. The question on the ballot was, should the clubhouse be replaced? It was, should the citizens pay an extra X percent income tax to do soccer fields, baseball fields,
That was this
clubhouse
past time.
replacement?
No, that city, the
did it
golf course
twice.
wasn't put on the same ballot
That's
with
because
Duke
the
Park.
second time it was on there, the second time the levy was put on the ballot, the clubhouse was under construction, or it may have even been completed at the time. You did not vote on the question of whether or not the clubhouse should be replaced. It
But
was-
you guys
It was
didn't
how
want
the
to replace
funding,
it.
we wanted additional funding to help pay for it.
Okay. I don't understand, so who would I also go to, who do I go to for the Troy Foundation? I mean, is it someone through you guys, or someone from the city,
The
or?
building,
That is a-
building in the
totally
block
independent.
east.
That is a separate organization.
Pardon me?
That's a separate organization,
Okay,
and they're at 216 West Franklin Street. So
okay.
they're block west on Franklin.
And it says Troy Foundation?
Yes, it does, yes. There's a little plaque on the wall that says Troy Foundation. Yep.
Okay. Okay then, thank you.
Oh, and I have a
very-
question for you, Mrs. Pike. How's Ellis Street looking?
Well, we've got a few places that's flooding in front of the houses, but
Did you get paved?
Did you get paid?
it lovely. And I don't have to pay no more for front end alignments.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, Scott and Moorhead.
Are there any other residents that wish to address council tonight? Please come forward, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume.
Hello, my name is Gary Ospaw. I live at 523 South Walnut Street. And Mr. Seaver's father helped me purchase that property 43 years ago, and that's how long I've lived there. And I want to first of all thank Mr. Pierce for accepting my invitation to come to my house and walk through my neighborhood. I'm very concerned about the quality of life that has deteriorated in my neighborhood. We don't live that far away from beautiful downtown Troy. During the Strawberry Festival, there are a lot of people that park on our street. And at that time, my wife and I have decided not to leave the house because if we did, we wouldn't have a parking space. But a lot of comments have been made from people out of town about how nice our property looks, but the properties around our house are in terrible shape due to trash, overgrown weeds and bushes, brush that's been cut down and laying in people's yards, alleyways that are covered with brush and overgrown trees that the trash and recycled trucks have to come through our yard to get around them. And I thank Mr. Pierce for coming and taking a walk with me through my neighborhood so we could see, and I look forward to working more with him for this. Thank you.
And I have a question here. Are you 500 block between West and Raper?
Yes.
Okay. And it's one.
Well, it's between Raper and Simpson.
Raper and Simpson, and it's one way right there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
All right.
But I consider my neighborhood to be that surrounding area, all the way from East-West Street, all the way down to Race,
Okay.
and through Mulberry to Market Street. That's what I consider my neighborhood.
All right.
Is it
Okay.
trash or dilapidated housing or
Some
maintenance
of it
issues?
is, a lot of it is owned by other people that don't live there, and the renters don't care. It's not their place, so they don't really care to take care of it. But in the past 8 years, it has really gone downhill. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council tonight?
Can I respond to that real quick?
Mr. Seaver?
Didn't we create a fund for repairs, for maintenance and that stuff for downtown? Has that been depleted?
You're talking about the revolving loan?
Yeah.
That we created out of the ARPA funds?
Yes.
No, that's still there, and we are still entertaining applications. We've got a few that have run through. There has to be a willingness, they have to be eligible. Mr. Pierce and I talked before council, there are a couple of properties that he brought up. I've asked the zoning department to kind of quote-unquote sweep that area one more time. Some of those, it takes time between when we notify, we have to give them a certain amount of time before we can then take some action, and that's court mandated, I guess. And so I'd be willing to bet that most, if not all of those issues are in the process, but I'll have Mr. Davis's staff give us an update.
Thank you, sir. Anything else, Mr. Seaver? Any other comments or questions? All right. Last call for citizen comments. Our meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting will be August 15th, 7 o'clock, right here in council chambers.